So, we're going to talk tonight about the Father's love. When you think of the Father's love, what comes to mind? What do you think of when you think about a Father's love? Tonight I'm going to talk about a particular story that illustrates the Father's love, particularly our Heavenly Father's love. You know, in Luke 15, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' Jesus then proceeded to tell them three parables: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son." So what we kind of have here is like the lost trilogy. But my focus is going to be on the third parable, and that is the parable that's traditionally called the parable of the lost son. Sometimes it's called the prodigal son. But once we read through it, you will see something quite different from maybe what the title suggests. And it starts in verse, and we're in Luke chapter 15, and it starts in verse 11. It says, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to the father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them." And when you think about it, when we receive an inheritance, or let's say our father or our mother or somebody in the family dies, and they read the will, you know, that's when we receive the inheritance. But here is this son. He's coming to his father saying, "I don't want to wait until you die." He's basically almost like saying, "You can just drop dead right now. I don't need you. Just give me everything that's coming to me." But think about maybe our own lives and how we relate to God. Sometimes we make choices in life that indicate that we are valuing things more than maybe we value God. You know, we can live our lives as if we didn't need God. And maybe, you know, sometimes we could think we can basically live without him. You know, God, just give us all our blessing. Give us all the blessings you plan to give us right now. Just give them to me all right now. And then you think, okay, I can just live with that and live without God. That's basically what this young son was doing. In verse 13, it says, "Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living." So this is what happened. He got his inheritance. He went off to this other land that was far away. Interesting how he says a distant country. And then he squanders it. Think about it in our own lives. You know, every day we're faced with different choices of where to spend our time, where to spend our money, where to spend our energy. And these things could be like an earthly inheritance or blessings from God, things that he gives us. And then we decide to use them on things other than spending time with him. We get easily fooled into thinking that there's something better, than God. Someplace better to spend our time, to spend our money, spend our energy. And these things can satisfy us for a while. You know, think about things that would bring you the most pleasure or satisfaction. It's always funny. Everybody wants to win the lottery. Say, "Oh yeah, I would just love to win the lottery." But most, you know, the odds are usually against us. You know, I don't know what the odds are, and most, you know, if you get a lottery ticket, what the odds are. But most of the time, the way we come about obtaining money is we have to work. It requires lots of work. And it also involves a lot of worrying. We worry about losing it. We have to do a lot of work to get more of it. We never feel quite secure about it. And there's never enough to satisfy. Or maybe what you think would bring you the most pleasure and satisfaction would be prestige, if you were just had a lot of popularity, really looked up to. But again, that is something that consumes a lot of time to maintain an image. It becomes an obsession and is so easily lost. And there's success. If I was just successful, I would be happy. But that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to attain. And it is very devastating when we don't reach it or we lose it. See, these types of pursuits, they can consume our lives, and we inevitably find ourselves on this path that is just more and more distant from God. But think about this, and this was talking about a distant country. What is the opposite of distant? The opposite of distant is closeness, or another word, intimacy. Because that's what the Son had with the Father, or could have had with the Father. And that is what we are able to have with God. In verse 14 it says, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. His lifestyle, it was like an addiction. He kept needing to probably spend more and more to feed that addiction, to have all those pleasures, only to end up basically filing for bankruptcy in the end. He was flat broke and experiencing famine. All that can do is awaken him to the need that he's in need. Oh, dire need. But he lost touch with his real need, which is what he chose to leave behind. So this all happening to him in the story here, this is a blessing in disguise. And sometimes maybe we, in our lives, we find ourselves in a similar circumstance spiritually. When we discover that we lost touch with what our real need is. Living apart from an intimate relationship with God eventually reveals this desperate need, this need and what we're lacking, and that we're not finding in the choices that we've made and that we're making. So it's a blessing in disguise for us to realize this, to realize that these choices we made and where we ended up is just not working out. And God allows us. God allows us to go our own way, because we can better appreciate what we can truly have when we are with Him. Verse 15 says, so he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. Now that's a pretty interesting. Remember who Jesus is speaking to in this parable. And he has his Pharisees, of course he has the tax collectors. In Jewish culture, pigs, feeding pigs, having to do anything with pigs was just despicable. It was the lowest of positions to have, really. But here he was experiencing what it was like to be a slave now. He was a son. He lived as a son when he was with his father, but now he's having to live as a slave. He has to struggle now with the consequences of that. He is unable to experience the benefits of the relationship he had when he was home with his father. And basically, that's the way it is when you have a servant or a slave relationship. You can't experience an intimate relationship as a son does with a father. And when we have made bad choices, we are forced to deal with consequences. There could be any number of things that could happen in our lives. We may end up, because of our choices, struggling with depression, health problems, or maybe big debt.